Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Thank you for tuning in. Do you remember a week or so ago there was a story in the news that showed Putin? What is his first name? Vladimir? I'm drawing a blank on his first name. But the president of Russia showing a map, and it implied that he was going to nuke Florida. Let's talk about this a little bit. Alan Hall is on the phone. He's the senior analyst at the Socionomics Institute. He's a lecturer and advisor to senior United States military leaders on how social mood data can forewarn of the risk of epidemic disease. Wow, that is fascinating right there. So maybe we'll talk more than just about that. But the question on my notes is, why would Putin want to nuke Florida? And I guess that was posed by the BBC on March 1st.
Yep.
All right, so let's find out about this. Yeah, I don't want to be nuked either. You know, who would want to be nuked? Right?
Yeah.
All right, good morning. What an honor to have you on our show, Alan. Thank you for calling in.
Thank you very much, Larry. It's great to be here again.
And where are you?
I'm currently in my home in Northeast Georgia, but I work in Gainesville, Georgia at the Socionomics Institute.
Yes. Well, good to hear from you again. Tell me about this. I mean, you know what my thought was when I first saw that? It was, well, Trump lives here, right? Trump's got a home here. That's got to be part of it.
Right. Well, I think Russia was just trying to get some attention in the U.S. media, but you know, it's interesting to think about what somebody who hasn't been following this would think when they saw that BBC headline, "Why would Putin want to nuke Florida?" and that picture of the bombs falling toward Tampa. You know, where is this coming from? Well, we think the answer is that negative social mood has played havoc with Russian history over time, and it's doing it again. The best metric of a country's social mood is its benchmark stock index, and Russia's has been underwater since about 2008. So the country is undergoing negative mood, which we predicted back in 2007. We anticipated a big bear market in Russia, and we detail that prediction also in our recent paper in the Journal of Behavioral Finance and Economics. Part of our study in 2007 explored how Russia behaved in previous bear markets. And Russia didn't have a stock market before 1995, so we examined its earlier history using a pretty good proxy, which is for global social mood, which is the Dow Industrial Average. During past global bear markets, Russia and the Soviet Union, they tended to embrace authoritarian leaders, grab more territory, build up their military, and act aggressively toward neighbors and toward the West. So Russia's benchmark stock index, the RTSI, is still down about 49% from its 2008 all-time high. And the country is exhibiting this classic behavior that it has in past bear markets. On March 1, for example, President Putin warned that Russia has tested a whole new array of powerful strategic nuclear weapons that can't be intercepted or stopped. Well, that's a pretty strong threat right there.
Yeah.
And so it's been very interesting to watch this process through the socionomic lens.
Okay, so what has happened to cause this? And do they have a similar situation as we have in regards to, for example, if our government decides to change the corporate taxes, it might change the social mood as far as the economic part of our world. But I mean, in some ways we are connected to our government, but in other ways we're not. Are governments, I mean, are businesses in Russia completely connected to the government?
There's sort of what you might call an authoritarian democracy there, but we don't think that external forces like changing a tax rate will affect the social mood. we think the social mood is primary and everything else follows behind. Typically you get your big tax cuts right near peaks in the social mood, which is or positive extremes in the social mood, which are reflected in peaks in the stock market, and that's pretty much what we just had in the U.S. here. So, Russian business, what's going on in their economy, it's sort of secondary to what's going on with their relations to the West and with the U.S. And you've seen the latest problems with the U.K. and what's going on with its neighbors, Ukraine, and so forth. Those expressions of social mood are the ones that we're really looking at.
Who are the investors in Russia's stock market? Are the citizens there allowed to have freedom to invest like we do in the United States, or are there outside entities that are investing?
As far as I know, yeah, their citizens can invest in their stock market. I'm sure there are some outside entities. I don't dig too closely into that. What I mostly look at is their social behavior. The stock market is just a metric for it's more than just a financial index. It's a metric of social psychology. And so what happens throughout history is that when stock markets are near peaks, you have all these positive social expressions, like the creation of the European Union, and then after lows in stock markets, major lows, you have these tremendous conflicts. So we're riding these waves of social mood that we think are part of our evolutionary survival behavior, and nobody's in control of them. We're just doing what we do.
Yeah, I remember you telling us this similar kind of a message before. Does the president of the United States somehow affect that social mood over in Russia?
Well, we've got two new books out. One of them is Socionomic Studies of Society and Culture, and the other one is Socionomic Causality in Politics. And we do extensive studies of how social mood affects the careers of politicians, and not the reverse. Nobody's in control of social mood.
Isn't that interesting?
And we muster a lot of data and evidence to back that up. It's very fascinating. You owe it to yourself to check out those books.
Tell me the titles again. I want to put the cover of the book on the podcast that we're doing.
Sure. There are two of them: Socionomic Studies of Society and Culture, and Socionomic Causality in Politics. And they're full of hundreds of charts and stories about how social mood has affected social behavior across the world.
Does the are we still in a Cold War?
I think, I think most people would agree that we're back in a Cold War. The statements to that effect started coming out a couple of years ago, and now we have some pretty major thinkers all agreeing that we're in a new Cold War with Russia.
And should that be that way? I mean, can't we work things out?
Well, it depends on U.S. social mood and Russian social mood. If Russia's benchmark stock index begins surging higher, we should see some of this conflicting behavior ease off a little bit. But if it doesn't, and if the U.S. stock market continues this recent decline, you're going to see both of them heat up, and there's going to be a good bit more fireworks there.
The website that I have is socionomics.net. Is that part of the program that you're working with?
Yes, that's the website of the Socionomics Institute, and we're affiliated with Elliott Wave International, which does market technical analysis and forecasts for markets all over the globe, all kinds of markets.
Earlier, you said something I wanted to go back to. You said there's nothing we can do about it. Is there anything we can do with the information, the conclusions that you have come to, so that there may be something we can do about it? I mean, is there any way to use this information to avoid, for example, disease, which I think was the topic last time, or I don't know, conflicts to the point where somebody wants to threaten to nuke Florida?
Well, it cannot hurt to be aware of the socionomic view of this causality. Certainly, it would help politicians to understand that their theory is in part due, or that their popularity is in part due to the trend of social mood, and it helps in knowing that the social mood trend sort of regulates the level of risk we have for epidemic outbreaks, and it helps to know that the social mood trend regulates the risk we have for violent conflict. As to whether, in the chaos of social interaction, somebody can go in and deftly, maneuver things for a better outcome, that would depend upon a whole host of factors that are very complex to try to predict.
Was Russia one of the last countries to adopt a stock market? This is just fascinating me. I just assumed everybody had one, since there's global trading.
Yeah, right. Well, we had this huge global stock market rally from probably the 1980 to 2000, and late in that rally is when Russia began its stock market in 1995. They had done the glasnost and the openness, and there was people forget how optimistic everybody was on Russia back then. In 2007, Russia had a really powerful economy, and it was the darling of emerging market investors. Putin said a bunch of really interesting things back in 2003. See if I can find that. He was inclined to continue the embrace of the West that Boris Yeltsin had pursued, and he had a New York Times interview in which he said, by their mentality and culture, the people of Russia are Europeans. And he described a vision of Russia that was closely intertwined with Europe, economically, socially, and politically. He said, we firmly stand on the path of development of democracy and of a market economy. And he even said that Russia might join NATO. So that's an incredible difference than what we see now. Yeah. And we were ahead of that in terms of anticipating that, and it's because of this theory of social behavior that we look at.
So does this apply in smaller governments as well? Like does the same theory apply to like the state of Florida as it would to the country of the United States, or like in California with the marijuana laws changed? Does that change anything with mood, or in Florida we got this new gun law? Did that change the mood, and does that change the socionomics of the state?
Right. That's sort of the default way to think about it, and that's the way the media and everybody else thinks about social causality. They're always looking for some event to change the social mood. We don't think that's what's going on, and looking at it that way, it doesn't. It's just not correct. We think that social mood regulates the character and tone of social events.
That is interesting.
Yeah. And when you look at the data, that's what we prove over and over again in these books.
Is the up-and-coming generation, the students that are in high school now, are they even aware of all of this? And is this something that they should concern themselves with taking courses and being aware of, or is this just the older people?
I think it's definitely something the that should be taught in universities and possibly even in high schools. And we've had several teachers who've done that. Dr. Dennis Elam is currently doing that in Texas. Peter Atwater teaches a class on socionomics. It's something we'd really like to see more of happening, because I think people need to understand this idea of social behavior and social causality. It's a fascinating thing, and once you get it, it changes the way you read the news. All this media talk about, what caused the stock market to do, what event moved the stock market today. It's really just a bunch of churn.
I'm going to draw from my past and something I'm remembering and see if maybe it plays into this. And this is probably of no concern right now, but I remember as a kid hearing that the reason the Beatles were so popular was because the country had just gone through this devastating JFK assassination, and we needed something to bring up our mood. And these guys were like carefree young guys, and somehow that helped us, and not just in America, but in the whole Western culture, especially the U.S. and Great Britain. So, I mean, is that an example of this? And does that play into it? Like, does the mood, in addition to socionomics, does it also play into the, I don't know, like which movies are going to be popular or which music is going to be popular? Does that play? Does it all play a part?
Yes, it does. There is a long and extensive and fascinating study of the career of the Beatles in socionomic studies of society and culture, and it is well worth reading, because the Beatles were definitely what we call bull market characters, bull market artists, performers, and they did extremely well when the Dow was rising, and boy, did they encounter trouble when it was falling. And as to your very first comment there, with the assassination of Kennedy, that was a traumatic thing for the United States and for a lot of people. But I think the stock market rose about 4% right after he was assassinated. So the social mood was still trending positively during that time. The idea that some event like that's going to change the social mood trend, we can cite dozens and dozens of counterexamples.
It's almost like quantum physics. It's almost like contrary to what you would think, right?
Well, it is. It's a the idea that everybody's wedded to this physics mode of thinking, in which the billiard ball thing with the cause and effect,
right.
Action reaction. And that doesn't work in the social arena. Works fine in the physical arena, but not in the social arena.
Oh, wow.
There's something else. There's something else at work, and we think it's this patterned herding that produces the fractal patterns that have been identified by mathematicians in the stock market, and it's the source of this whole idea that history rhymes, and that we do the same things over and over again, but in different ways. And if you look at the stock market and history together, you understand that, we're doing the same things over and over again, and we're doing it at the same times relative to the stock market.
So what specifically could you actually predict? I'm guessing you could use it in a way to predict a big picture, maybe an ebb and flow of the stock market. But could you literally predict something in a minuscule way, like, I don't know, like who could be the president, or at least what kind of profile of a person could be the next president?
Yeah, the really specific predictions get tougher, but what we can do well with is predicting the character of social expression. And Robert Prechter has just published an issue of his Elliott Wave Theorist that has a large number of specific social predictions in it. and I'd be happy to send you a copy of that if you'd like.
Is that on your website?
No, it's a subscriber only, and it's the Elliott Wave Theorist, and it's the latest issue, and I can send it to you, Larry.
Okay, excellent. But I'm asking for on behalf of our listeners. Can our listeners get it?
You can go to ElliottWave.com, and that's 2 L's and 2 T's, Elliott Wave, and you can get it there. We've probably got some kind of good deal where you can get it on trial basis if you want.
It's just amazing to me that leaders from other countries, they sort of talk down about the United States and everything, but when there is an election year, everybody is just really pensive, and they are just wondering who the next president of the United States is going to be. It just seems like they flip-flop sometimes in their attitude about the United States. Does that happen with Russia too?
Yeah, I think it does. Russia, they have attitudes about who they'd like to be president and who they don't want to be president. And I think some of those may have surfaced in this latest election. Certainly, we've got a big investigation to that effect right now. So, Russia has been getting increasingly aggressive on a number of fronts, and the U.S. has been responding with its work with NATO and the missile batteries around Western Europe. It's one of these things where we think there is we think all this is part of a larger trend. Mood change at large peaks is not instantaneous. It can seem really broad and slow, and so we're seeing these things. The trend toward deglobalization, this political polarization, authoritarianism, the rise of authoritarianism and authoritarian leaders in a number of countries. We're seeing trade conflicts and tariffs, nationalism, xenophobia, isolationism, and tremendous doubts about democracy and a loss of popularity of democracy, and general confusion and disagreement about what is real even.
Wow.
So we think it's all part of the same thing. It's a large degree global trend toward negative social mood.
I think part of the difficulty with this topic is that we kind of have to allow ourselves to think differently. It seems to me like we have to step back and say, wait a minute, let's not look at this, like you say, like a pool table where the ball hits the ball, the cause and effect approach, and instead look at it for what it's worth, for what you have on the websites and in the books. Let me, before we run out of time, we got like a minute left. The two websites I went to, Elliott Wave, 2 L's, 2 T's, wave as in an ocean wave, ElliottWave.com. And the other website I went to was Socionomics.net. And that's where I got the cover of the book that I put onto the podcast that we're doing. Alan, thank you for being on the show with us. This is a hard topic to grasp. And I can see people arguing with you all the time, or at least questioning it. Not arguing in a negative way, but just trying to understand it themselves.
You're right, and we get a lot of that. We've tried to make it really easy for people to get this concept, and we've written a tremendous amount about it. So it's fascinating. It's a new science. We hope you'll get interested and check it out.
Thank you, Alan. That's awesome stuff. And if you're ever in this part of the country, I know you're not too far away. If you're ever in Central Florida, we'd love to have you in the studio.
Oh, I love Central Florida. We'll see if we can work it out.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Alan. That was awesome. The show continues on the other side of the break.
President Trump says now he's considering a veto of the spending bill passed by Congress to avoid a government shutdown tonight. He writes on Twitter, the Democrats abandoned young immigrants known as Dreamers, not mentioned in the bill, and the border wall is not fully funded.
The spending bill, which funds the government through September, is on its way to President Trump's desk. It boosts military and domestic spending and needed the support of Democrats because some Republican budget hawks opposed the bill.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. Police in southern France report 2 people killed in a hostage-taking at a supermarket.
French police saying officers have surrounded a supermarket in Trèbes, the incident believed to be still ongoing. A short time before the siege began, a police officer was shot and injured in another town close by.
Fox's Simon Owen. There are unconfirmed reports locally that the hostage